and welcome to this episode of Season 5 of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline Roche, and Sweyn and often guests talk about digital topics, including the world of online communications and digital inclusion, in a show which was the brainchild of digital storyteller, the late John Popham. Welcome to our show this week, Elizabeth Anderson, the CEO of Digital Poverty Alliance. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Hello, Pauline and Sweyn. Great to be here.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. How's the weather where you are, Elizabeth, and where are you?
So I'm in northwest Kent at the moment. It is still warmer than I'd like, but it's also grey. So there you go. What can you say?
Okay, good enough. Orkney, Sweyn, how's the weather in Orkney?
I'm in Kirkwall as usual, and it's very wet. It's been very wet for the last 2 or 3 days.
Oh,
And not too cold, but very, very wet. Dreadfully heavy rain. Never seen anything like it.
very
How about you?
good for the green and the crops.
Yes.
In Birmingham, it's grey skies now, a bit of blue, but has been beautiful over the weekend, so very glad to be out. But I did get some washing dried as well, which is always a good thing in my book. Elizabeth, we're delighted you could join us today. We know you're not going to be able to stay for the whole show, so we thought we'd go straight into welcoming you as our guest. And if I just give a few details about you, you're Chief Executive of the Digital Poverty Alliance, which is founded between the Foundation, Learning Foundation, Currys, and the Institute of Engineering and Technology. You manage the programs there, the operations and stakeholders to end digital poverty by 2030. You're also a trustee of heritage and animal welfare charities and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. You were previously chief executive of the UK's leading space society, British Interplanetary Society, and the oldest of its type in the world. And you have had other chief executive roles as well. Your other interests include heritage and culture, energy, policy, politics, international affairs, the environment, and animal welfare. So you've had a busy life, and you continue to have a very busy life trying to end digital poverty. How are things going in that world today?
Sadly, it's not something that you end overnight. It would be great if I could just tick that off as done and move on to the next societal issue. What has been very promising to see, though, over the last year, and I think if I was sitting here a year ago, it'd be a very different story. But we were all incredibly excited in the digital inclusion sector when the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology released the Digital Inclusion Action Plan in February earlier this year, which is not, and they are the first to say, this is not a long-term digital inclusion strategy. They've run a consultation on that with long-term goals, but it is the first of its type that we've had for 10 years, setting out short-term actions. And at the DPA, we are particularly excited because we are one of a handful of delivery partners, and we are working on taking old devices from 3 government departments, getting them refurbished, and getting them out to people and seeing the first responses from the first people receiving those first devices is ever the reminder of how transformational that is for a family.
Absolutely. So our devices already getting to people so quickly after the plan was announced.
Absolutely. So the plan itself was announced at the very end of February. I think it might have been the 28th. And by April, we had the first machines arriving with us and going out to people in need.
And they were arriving, ready to be distributed. They didn't have to be cleaned up or done anything too.
So the department have very kindly arranged for them to be cleaned up. So that's fantastic. So the data had already been taken off them. Commonly, when we receive devices, that's something that we organise. So that's not a problem. But it took that stage away, which is great. So then all we had to do was quality assure them, make sure they've got all their cables and they worked and all that kind of stuff. Get fresh licenses put on them, which we receive those citizenship licenses. So that saves us a little bit of a few pennies, and then get them out.
And how are you deciding who they go to?
So at the moment, for those who aren't familiar with the Digital Poverty Alliance, we run a number of programs which help people in specific areas or people who have particular experiences or characteristics. But we also have lots of people and lots of organisations constantly every day approaching us going, I don't live in this area or I don't fit these criteria and I still need help. Now, we could say, sorry, but we can't help you with that. But we don't say that because we're nice people who want to help as many people as we can. So we keep those people on a waiting list for rainy days such as this, where, you know, actually it turns out we can give them the support. So we've started out working through that list, particularly focusing on people who have been signposted by organisations. We ensure everyone is verified by someone with a professional relationship with them to make sure that need is genuine. Obviously, anyone could write in and say, I'll take a free laptop. So we always check that, but in a very respectful way. We're never asking about financial situations or anything like that. We are going to be moving forward working with some organisations in a few parts of the country to make sure that we're getting devices out with a nice spread. And there's a lot of reporting that we're going to be doing around this to really understand the impact that this is having and advocate for the fact that this shouldn't just stay a pilot. It should become something that's actually cross-government and indeed more wide across the public sector.
So when you say people in certain areas, is that certain geographical areas or in people with certain characteristics? Or the
A bit of both.
geographical? Okay.
A bit of both.
Okay.
So we're looking to be able to support people and ensure that we're doing that across all 4 home nations. We don't want to end up just doing London or just doing Midlands or just doing here or there. But we also want to make sure we're supporting a mix of ages and a mix of sort of experiences that people have had.
Well, Elizabeth, you know from the excellent work that the Digital Poverty Alliance has done on data and, you know, knowing what the need is, and now knowing how there might be some supply, what's the, you know, what percentage of the need do you think you'll be able to meet, say, within a year?
I think in reality, when we consider that there's around, and this is according to data that we had support from Deloitte to be able to unravel, there's around 4 million people in the country who are offline purely down to affordability. And that's affordability for a suitable device and the connectivity that they need. I'd be massively overstating it if I started even putting a percentage to this, because 4 million is an awful lot of people, and laptops are pricey animals. But every family that we can help, or every household we can help, I'm incredibly proud of. And what we are also seeing is that other corporate organisations are going, well, maybe we could do a bit of that, actually. You know, if the government are doing it, maybe it's not an information governance risk. Maybe it is a green angle. We're also really pushing our individual device donation schemes as well, because we've all got or have had a laptop in a drawer or a phone that we're not using anymore because it might be useful one day or it's too good to throw away. It's not going to be useful to you anymore, but it is going to be really useful to somebody else, and it is far too good to throw away. That part was true. So, you know, get them to us and then we can get them out again. And it turns out around half of those are actually really usable, even if they're quite old devices. So
so presumably though, this work won't really end because all those devices will have a lifetime, and unless the people unless the people who need them are brought out of the economic circumstances they're in, they're going to need a replacement at some point, and they're probably not going to be able to afford that either. And also, there's always going to be new people coming along as they leave school, I guess, or as they, I don't quite know what the other trigger events might be, but there'll be, if we're just talking about adults, there'll be a never-ending program because, or is it, or is there a plan otherwise from that?
Well, so one, we would hope that the digital inclusion strategy will set out sort of the long-term plan here, the long-term goal. Basic things like ensuring that actually benefits and universal credit have built into the basket of essential goods, being able to afford this kind of tech and being able to afford connectivity. However, what we hope on a very short-term basis is that somebody who has access to a laptop now, before they had the access, how did they write a CV? How did they apply for any kind of welfare or support or help or assistance or training? Once you have a laptop, actually from that aspirational perspective, there's so much more that you can do that you were shut away from. But I absolutely agree, Sweyn. What we have to have is that long-term plan. one of the things that we called for in our National Delivery and Advocacy Plan that we re-released at the start of the month. One very basic thing, every child needs a laptop. And we need the Department for Education to ensure that every child has a laptop that they can use in school and take home for homework. So, it travels with them. Because that's not the case at the moment. That is far from the case. People sometimes imagine, but surely kids have a laptop in the classroom. No, they don't. Let me dispel that now.
What about the rest of the infrastructure, Elizabeth, like libraries, community centres, community organisations that help people get online? What is the government's plan to support that network?
So we know that that network helps, lots of people every year. We want that network to be able to help, millions more people every year. We also know that the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology is working across government with the aim of being able to release some funding later on this year, which is the magic word. Everybody is always keen to hear when there's money available, because actually that is so important for being able to boost these services. So we know that those will be grown. We are very keen that the VCSE community, so the charities that operate, the anchor organisations that are in areas all across the country, are able to benefit from some of that funding as well, to be able to grow capacity and to be able to grow innovation. Something we are very, very insistent on is that, there's amazing services happen in central libraries every single day. There's a lot of support in other libraries, but the smaller the area, the smaller the library, the more likely it is to be run by volunteers, to be open limited hours. How do we get parity so that wherever you are in the country, whether you're in Manchester or whether you're in Whitehaven or Great Yarmouth or somewhere that maybe hasn't seen a lot of investment in the area, that you've got the same level of support when you walk into a community asset organisation. So that's something we're pushing.
Which brings me on to my question about standards, because unlike Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, the UK does not have a national library strategy. So every local authority can decide for itself what makes an efficient and comprehensive service for its local authority, and we can discuss that at length. But there aren't currently any standards for the provision of digital inclusion services as well, and that includes the voluntary sector as well as the public sector. Is there any discussion at government level about that? Is this the kind of thing that will be discussed at the APPG, for example?
So I hope that we're always discussing lots of things at the APPG. I also hope that this will be brought to the Digital Inclusion Action Committee, which is the new cross-sector committee that DCIT have established. Again, you see absolutely rock star standards coming out of some local authorities with huge amounts of work, and funding happens in those areas not by luck. A lot of work goes in from council officers into bringing that in, but you've got to have the leadership, you've got to have the political will, as well as the enthusiasm of the officers, who can often only cover digital inclusion if they're allowed to, for want of a better word. We have certainly talked to officers across every one of the home nations, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, who've said, I want to do more about this. How do I convince my managers? How do I convince my councillors that this is something we've got to do? Absolutely. Something, again, that we are asking DCIT to consider is mandating that every local authority needs to have a team. However small that team has to start out, they've got to have a team focusing on digital inclusion. Certainly in England, we've got the devolution situation happening right now. So that is really going to change how local authorities operate in England. That has to be an opportunity to do that. But we also need to see that same opportunity, probably imagined in quite a different way, in the rest of the UK.
So which local authorities would you point to as good practice in this area, Elizabeth? I'm putting you on the spot, but I mean, we need to know if there are outliers that we need to be looking towards.
So if you are an amazing local authority, and I don't mention you right now, this is a no shade situation. Some incredible examples would be Manchester, particularly places like Salford, sitting within there, and some of the work they've done to understand the local landscape. Leeds, Essex, Renfrewshire, these are absolute standouts. There are more that I could certainly name. I could probably give you a list of about 30, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of local authorities across all 4 of the nations. And unfortunately, many of those local authorities, actually the vast majority of those local authorities, I hate to say, don't have a digital inclusion team. They don't have anyone focusing on this.
I'm not in England, but I can see and hear about all the devolution and reorganization of local authorities that seems to be on the way in England and underway. My impression, this may be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that on average there'll be fewer local authorities with a much broader and more general idea of where their place is than it being a real place, if I can put it that way. I dare say larger local authorities, they might stand more of a chance of getting a tiny team in a larger authority than in a small one, so there might be advantages that way. But what do you, how do you think all this stuff will survive this kind of lack of localized and almost anti-localism that's going on? And it happened in Scotland in 1973, by the way. It's not an anti-English point at all. But it seems to me that England is going in the same wrong direction that Scotland went in the 70s and then in the 90s. I just don't know how digital inclusion might be affected.
Yeah, I think from a this is very much personal opinion, I think it will become very challenging for officers to understand the local context of such a large area, potentially, but that's not a DPA position, that's an Elizabeth Anderson
Yes, yes.
position. From a digital inclusion standpoint, what we have seen so far and gives me a level of optimism is that combined authorities, so those tend to be the mayoral authorities that currently sit over the top of other layers for people who don't spend their life considering local government every day, tend to be more likely to have that small digital inclusion team.
Okay.
From a digital inclusion standpoint, I would rather have a couple of people focusing on a larger area than nobody focusing on a smaller area, because at least that's a step in the right direction for digital inclusion. But that local context is everything, and the fact that you're making the area bigger is going to make it more difficult, particularly for those non-city areas.
Exactly, and what we've seen in Scotland over the decades is, you know, the concept of where the centre of a area is. You get fewer and fewer centres, so you get fewer and fewer central libraries.
Yeah.
And it's easy for a larger authority to say, "Oh, look, we've got 2 of these things," whereas before, when there were 4 different councils, they would at least have had 4.
Yeah.
Now, it's not always a bad thing. Depends on the service, depends what's going on. But for libraries, I can't imagine a situation where that's a good thing.
It is absolutely a challenge. And we released a report actually recently showing that if you call a central library, they'll know where you can get digital inclusion help.
Yeah.
If you call a library that's not a central library, they're far more likely to go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I know you're going to have to go soon. Just back to the standards issue. Are standards being discussed, and what would be within your ideal standard for digital inclusion work around the country?
So standards, as I say, I very much hope will be discussed at the Digital Inclusion Action Committee once that starts meeting. And it was slated to start meeting in June, so hopefully we'll hear something very soon about that. What I would absolutely love to say would be at least 2 people focusing on every local authority area as it is now, not those bigger, but the smaller ones that we have right now. That absolutely every library, every school, every local authority or NHS owned public service had somebody within them who had a house duty around digital inclusion. I think that would massively help. And I think something that we are hugely missing, that, you know, government and local government could play a huge role in convening, is actually that mapping of what support is available where. I know that is a difficult thing to do. I know that things change very frequently, but it's so imperative that we have that for 2 reasons. One, there's a lot of great things happening, and wouldn't it be wonderful if when somebody calls, they could be signposted to the service they need near to them. And secondly, it would show us the gaps. It would show us where there is absolutely nothing. And then whether it's a charity, whether it's a local authority, whether it's a company, whatever it may be, an entity could look at that and go, great, what can we do to help there? But it's
Yeah.
very hard to set those to set standards when we're missing that level of data, and when I think there's actually a lot more data needs to be collected at government level to really understand digital inclusion, digital exclusion, and the fact that if you've got a smartphone, that doesn't mean you're included.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think people do console themselves with that thought that people have a mobile phone and therefore they're connected, and they're just not. And I see that every day. Elizabeth, I know, as I say, you have to go soon. What if people want to contact you and get involved with the Digital Poverty Alliance and your work? What's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. So visit digitalpovertyalliance.org. You can find out a lot more about what we're doing there, and you can get in touch with me by emailing me at elizabeth@digitalpovertyalliance.org, and I'll be delighted to hear from you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for joining us, Elizabeth. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much. I'll watch the
Elizabeth.
rest of the show later. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes, lots done, lots to
Excellent.
do. Yeah, yeah, it's great, but it's great that the digital the APPG on digital inclusion, which was previously the data poverty APPG, is meeting and has set up this digital inclusion committee. I think Hilary Armstrong is the no, who's that? Is that right? They have appointed a baroness somebody
Oh, yes, I
to
forget who.
chair it. But
Indeed,
yeah, I
yes.
think they are I think it sounds like, they're getting movement. I mean, having announced the action plan in February and then already getting devices into the hands of people who need them
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
great thing to hear.
yeah. Scotland, of course, has had, well, it's had a digital strategy of which one of the 4 or 5 planks is digital inclusion
Uh-huh.
for 3 or 4 years now. So
Right.
good to see England catching up as usual.
No shade there. No shade there, Swain. Okay. Let's go back to our usual kind of format, which we obviously went straight into having Elizabeth because she wasn't able to stay with us the whole show. And look at some dates that we picked up in events, please.
Dates, yes. Well, here's this is a fun one. I think it's called uh, Passwordless Day,
Mm.
and I must admit it's been invented by a commercial company who sell
Uh-huh.
alternative technologies to passwords. But it kind of gives us a chance to think about, what passwords are and what they aren't. And what this company says is that the password is to user security what the cassette player is to music, outdated, inefficient, and prone to failing at the worst possible moment. And it's time, they say, to go passwordless. And now there are many, many, many different suppliers of passwordless options, of which there are two main types. One is biometrics, which is, the way your phone can recognize your face or your thumbprint or something like that, or multi-factor authentication, where you ha you have to get a code generated, which you then enter as well as a password or as well as a thumbprint or whatever. But just, it's when we actually think about how many passwords we have to remember on a typical day,
Mm.
then just and all the special characters and capital letters and numeric digits and all that sort of thing that are in passwords, it is worth thinking about making sure that passwords are secure. Uh, from my mind, I think a good trick is to use something like the first word of a line of poetry that you know well as sorry, the
Mm.
first letter of each word of a line of poetry that you know well as your password. Maybe
Mm.
add a number at the end, or a song lyric can help in that way as well. They're just completely random from the point of view of uh, being cracked, but they are memorable. So
Mm.
there are ways to make passwords more manageable, other than abandoning them completely. But I like the focus here on how tricky and awkward and exclusive to many people this huge variety of passwords that everybody has uh, is. So that
Mm.
was that one. And the second one I found was a United Nations Day, and this is Public Service Day. So this kind of ties in with what we were talking about with Elizabeth. We'll we will judge people's public service a bit a bit more positively if they can include digital inclusion in what they do. But it's a
Mm.
United Nations Day basically to recognize the importance of public officials and civil servants and uh, people who support them in running essential services, but also in promoting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Because without governments and civil services and public servants, it's very, very hard to focus on those kind of societal improvements that we
Mm.
need. However irritating bureaucracy may be at times, there we are. So that's the two dates I have for today.
Very good. Yeah. Both very interesting, useful ones, and hopefully of interest to people who give us a look from time to time. And I picked up an event that I just like the sound, the title, so that's how it got into the list for today. And this is on tomorrow, and it's called Digital Twins, Barista Robots, and AI for the Office, and it's an event run by Glasgow Skeptics in Glasgow on tomorrow evening. And the blurb says it will explore how emerging technologies are reshaping the workplace in this engaging lecture. From virtual replicas that optimize office systems to robotic baristas serving your morning coffee and AI tools transforming productivity, this talk delves into the practical and surprising ways automation and intelligence are being integrated into everyday work environments. And the speaker is Professor Jörn Menon, Design, Manufacturing and Engineering Management from the University of Strathclyde. You mentioned digital twins earlier on in our pre-show chat, Sweyn. What do digital twins mean?
It's a computer model that takes data that's been generated in the real world and kind of runs it as if things were happening in not in real time, but in accelerated time, so that you can work out what might happen under certain circumstances. It's quite a tricky concept to grab, actually.
Mm,
And there are, I mean, it either is or has recently been a very fashionable term um, for something that to some extent has happened since the dawn of computers, really. It's grown out of testing, so it's like testing a scenario against some real data
hmm
rather than inventing the data that you're going to test your scenario against.
Okay.
It's quite there's quite a lot of issues and problems with creating a digital twin, or not least of which is that to get an accurate one, it's really a lot of work. It's a very
Mm,
expensive thing to do,
mm,
and sometimes you have to ask, well, what is it you're trying to get out of the digital twin? You need to have a kind of question that you need to ask the situation. But I love the title. Yes,
yeah.
and no surprise to me that it's an academic that has come up with a title like that, because academics are brilliant at snappy titles.
Well,
Uh,
according to the blurb, it was the title or the blurb, one or the other,
it was the blurb.
was created by ChatGPT.
Yes, the
Yeah.
event description
So yes,
above that you read out
yes,
was
yeah.
generated by ChatGPT based
hmm
on the title
Yeah.
and a short prompt, of course.
Okay.
Did you
Right.
notice?
Yes, I think we're gonna all
Uh,
have
I
to
think
notice
it'll.
this now.
I think it'll. If it is nothing else, and I'm sure it will be more than this, it will be a bit of fun, that event
Mm,
for sure.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure how I feel about ro barista robots. I've got a couple of friends who run a cafe that I always go to at the weekend in King's Heath in Birmingham, and I don't want a robot replacing Rory.
Well, on the other hand,
he's just
if Rory had a robot, then he could focus on chatting to you and not get your order wrong.
no,
No,
no.
okay,
I like watching him do his magic, and it's a whole process thing. They've just opened a new cafe, my friends, in King,
right.
a new they've moved from one place to a bigger
Uh-huh.
place now, and they've just reopened to actually have people in the cafe now rather than just serving from the hatch, and just seeing that interaction between Rory and people and Farah, and it's just it's just better. It's better than tech, and I
Yes,
love tech,
yes. No, I
but
agree. I
yeah,
agree.
it's I wouldn't want to replace that. I mean, this sounds like a really, do they have water in your country? Question, but are there baristas on Orkney? Is it a
Oh,
thing as
yes,
well? Yeah.
yes.
Mm,
There are.
mm,
It's a relatively recent development,
mm,
10, maybe 15 years.
Uh-huh.
Ago, you would have struggled to find a decent coffee or a decent, coffee machine even.
Mm.
But now, pretty much everywhere has pretty good um, coffee,
Mm-hmm.
helped by a couple of, as it were, trailblazing places, which suddenly got much better than everybody else, and then everybody else decided, oh well, they need one of these too, and I've caught
Uh-huh.
up a bit. And also
Yeah.
demand has become, I mean, it's become less, it's become well, completely unacceptable now, hasn't it? To go somewhere and just
Mm.
be offered
Mm.
instant coffee like it
Yeah.
was like 25 years ago, and that was just
Mm-hmm.
kind of normal, unless you
Yeah.
went to a special place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. And then AI for the office. I shared an event for West Midlands Funders Network on Friday on digital frontiers, including AI, and
Mm,
there was a lot of enthusiasm for AI from the funders and from charities who kind of think it's going to be helpful around productivity and assessing grants and kind of applying for grants and stuff like that. But I still have my kind of spidey sensors are up around the risks of this and as we've talked often on the show about the kind of low level of digital skills amongst some people in the sector, in funders and charities alike, especially small funders. And so I'm just worried that it'll be a bit like the old days when kind of unscrupulous providers um, made charities think that they had to spend thousands of pounds on websites when in fact they could have, done something very simple and very
yeah,
similar for a lot less money or for free, in fact, sometimes.
yeah.
Um, so my concern is about AI being seen as the answer to everything
Mm,
and people being reckless with their data and
hmm.
not being cautious enough really.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Every new technology that comes along, this is the case of with, and AI is no exception for sure.
Mm. There isn't there a thing that something regret, there's a concept of regret in certain spheres, and I could see tech regrets kind of
Yeah,
happening in some cases here, and I was happy to share the event on Friday, but I was still also trying to say to people, research, but have guardrails. Don't think it's going to be the answer to everything, and
yeah,
don't take your eye off it. Just don't let it get on
yeah.
with it itself.
And you still
Yeah.
need people who know enough of the subject that they're operating in to critically assess the output of an AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an
Because
opportunity for those of us active in the tech for good world to maybe this is our opportunity to get involved in organizations that we care
yeah,
about and giving them a hand with that. I mean, one of the things I
yeah,
said on Friday was about recruiting digital trustees. There's lots of organizations still don't have one or more digital trustees on board,
yeah,
and but there are people out there who want to be trustees of organizations and have digital skills. So I think it's an
absolutely.
idea whose time has come even better now with this opportunity. So yeah.
Someone I can't remember who brought this up, but someone I heard recently compare AI in these early days with Wikipedia in its early days,
Mm, mm,
and all sorts of examples of people being misled by Wikipedia because there were things that were just a bit wrong, not, or that had been deliberately, placed in Wikipedia entries, and then people were coming out with these in embarrassing official contexts.
mm,
I think, and the analogy was that AI is a similar kind of tool in that sense, in that what it produces is you've got to be healthily skeptical of
yeah,
it, and you've got to have independent ways of, you know, checking it and verifying it depending on how important the context is.
yeah,
And I can just see all the same. But obviously, the problem with AI is many times more complicated than it was with Wikipedia, because at least with Wikipedia, you kind of knew when you were looking at Wikipedia. Whereas with AI, depending on what it's hidden in or integrated with or whatever, you may not even realize it's that what you have in front of you is from AI.
yeah,
And I think charities, and as you say, the smaller the organization, the less likely they are to have someone who can really appreciate this and make it work for the organization. And
yeah,
yeah, I can see from that point of view why every charity should really be having a digital trustee, even if that role is combined with some other role for the very
Mm,
smallest
yeah,
organizations. They need
yeah,
someone whose role it is to know about this and understand it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd certainly like to see more in all the charities up and down the country, as I say, especially the smaller ones, because they're the majority of charities that
Mm,
exist
mm.
anyway. And there might be other benefits too.
I mean,
Um,
I think in Orkney, for those smaller charities, they would very much look to Voluntary Action Orkney, that organisation uh, that most areas have. But I'm not quite sure how obvious it is in other parts of the country necessarily that those organisations even exist. Never mind looking
yeah,
to them for assistance.
yeah. I mean, they exist, yes, but they're not
Yeah.
always that well known, as you say.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not, there's no guarantee that the awareness is among those organizations either,
No.
sadly,
No.
because as I've often said, digital transformation as a thing hasn't been done wholesale in the charity sector. So, we're still kind of catching up in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Um, and I know that the NCVO and Akivo, the Association of Chief Executives of Voluntary Organizations, have been doing some work on the new compact. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's between the government and the voluntary sector. And I'm not sure that there was enough or any emphasis on tech and digital
Hmm.
transformation for the
Hmm.
sector in that. And I think if there wasn't, it's a missed opportunity. And if
Yeah.
there was, it certainly I haven't heard about how much of it there is in. So I think the national organizations need to be mindful and kind of
Yeah.
looking to kind of um babysit's word comes to mind, but some kind of support, to
Yeah.
be provided. All other organizations as well, like locality. I know there's an awareness, but there's not always provision. And some of that comes down to funding, and some of it comes down to lack of digital skills, lack of confidence. I mean, you and I
Yeah.
would be very happy to question a tech uh, solution without feeling embarrassed or that we were on the wrong track. And if even if everything was right and everything was fine, we wouldn't be phased by that. Whereas other people lack that kind of confidence of
Yeah.
just being able to ask questions and sort of say, well,
Absolutely.
that doesn't make any sense to me, can
Absolutely.
you explain it a bit more?
Yeah.
Fortunately, people in the tech world also lots of people there have consciences as well, and do
Yes.
want to help other people. And so a lot of the people who came to this event on Friday, um, tech from tech companies, are there because they have a conscience as well, and they want to offer
Yeah. Yeah.
alternatives to the big tech solutions. So good luck to them, and we'll keep an eye on that. There'll be a report from that conference, so I'll
Oh, excellent.
highlight that
Excellent.
when it
Yes.
becomes available. Okay, so let's move on. We've got a couple of stories we picked up along in the last few weeks as well. And in fact, the first one is about the DPA, the Digital Poverty Alliance's
Oh, yes.
National Delivery and Advocacy Plan
My tabs are in a
2025.
funny order this week. Never
Oh,
mind.
okay. Well,
I think I found the plot just about. Here we go.
this was one we scheduled even before we knew Elizabeth was joining us. Elizabeth Anderson was joining us on the program, but we're very happy to have it here coincidentally. This is their National Delivery and Advocacy Plan, setting out a shared framework to drive progress, providing structure, focus, and accountability needed to ensure that digital inclusion is no longer optional, charitable, or fragmented. Exactly the conversation we've just been having, but embedded in how we design systems, allocate resources, and deliver support. The DPA's first national delivery and advocacy plan was launched in 2023, where they made a clear commitment to move the national conversation from awareness to action, which shaped their phase one part of the program, and that concluded in June this year to lay the foundation for phase two. Digital inclusion, they say, is now firmly embedded in policy discourse, and momentum is building across sectors. And I have to say, I think I can see that in conversations I'm having with people. This is a practical working document built to align national ambition with local delivery, clarify where responsibility lies, and ensure success is measured by lived experience, not just policy intent. And they have 6 missions um, to structure the national delivery and advocacy plan, each representing a critical area where sustained and coordinated effort is required. And the 6 missions are number one, to increase awareness among government, politicians, industry, and the public about the need for strategic and sustainable action to end digital poverty. And as Elizabeth was saying when she was with us on the show earlier, this, it's not just about people having a device, that there needs to be more strategy about how to make sure the device achieves the ends that we hope it will. Number two of these missions is ensure affordable connectivity and guarantee full digital access for those in need. And again, in the work that I do, and I know you do as well, Sweyn, connectivity can't be assumed. We still need to make sure that people are connected, kind of 24/7 really, and everywhere they go. Number three, to improve standards of accessibility and inclusiveness across all digital products and services. And again, I think people assume that a product is accessible and kind of includes inclusivity among its features and benefits. Not always, so we have to make sure we keep on top of that. Number four of these missions is to expand essential digital and critical thinking skills across society to meet changing needs. And again, something I often refer to, especially the critical thinking skills. Not sure the schools are yet building that into teaching because so many other things are required, but I think it's certainly vital, especially with AI developing. As we've just been talking about, it needs to be top of the agenda. Number five mission is to build the evidence base to deepen understanding of digital poverty. And this is something that the DPA has been doing ever since it started and providing excellent research. I highly recommend anybody who hasn't read it already to read their the research that they've done so far. And number six, strengthen local capacity to deliver joined up digital inclusion support. And this is one I can't emphasize too much. It's great having these national programs to support digital inclusion, but there's nothing to beat local organizations who understand the position on the ground, who see it every day, and for them to be involved in delivering the digital inclusion support. So, Sweyn, have you got any comments yourself about any or all of those missions?
It looks like a great development from phase. If we're looking at this as phase two, it looks like a good move into that new space. I think of the six missions, I think the two that will be trickiest will be the last one, the local capacity to deliver joined up support, because I think particularly with all the upheaval at the moment in English local authorities, it will be hard to achieve focus on that until that's a lot further along, but that'll be a year or two yet. And the other one is, as the one you highlighted as well, is the critical thinking skills. I think are very, very important, because that doesn't just apply to digital stuff, that applies to kind of everything really.
Yeah, yeah.
I like to see that number three, the mission to improve standards of accessibility in digital products and services themselves. That's a good one. I wouldn't necessarily have expected to see that in here, but it's great that it's there. And generally, I think it's the DPA is doing really good, steady work, and it's getting involved with its other national and regional and local partners. It's working together with them and forefronting them where they need to be forefronted, and taking the lead where that's necessary as well. I think it's been really great to see how it's developed over the last 3 or 4 years. The DPA,
yeah,
I think,
about that, yeah.
And long may it continue, and may it continue to improve and develop.
Absolutely. I know we've had previous DPA colleagues on the show, Freddie Queck and Paul Finnis, amongst others. Ciara Allman, of course, who's gone back to the States now, but I mean, she did some great work on the research, especially, which I loved. I thought the standard of research they do is very high, and great that it includes so many other organizations. Having an alliance means they're constantly bringing in, kind of more people who are engaged in this work.
Yes, the
And I
the
really
clue's in
like
the
that.
name, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I've
They're
just I
yeah,
was
go
just
on.
going to say, just right at the end of this piece that you were highlighting, there's a kind of get involved section, the 3 bullet
Okay.
points. So it's encouraging us
Yeah.
all to read the full report. It's encouraging us to get to grips with the communications toolkit to align messaging and amplify support, and to partner with the DPA to help deliver inclusion where it is needed most. And my favorite bit of all is this sentence towards the end. Digital poverty is not inevitable. It is the result of policy choices and it can be ended by better ones. And I think if you had to summarize the whole thing, that would be at least part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see that. I think they're certainly using their platform to highlight messages that we can subscribe to very easily. Yeah, so more power to your elbow, DPA, and we will certainly keep promoting you and your work. And I know that they've launched the next End Digital Poverty Day in September. They've launched the kind of sign-ups for that, and they're also going to be announcing some digital inclusion awards on that at that event. So keep an eye out for them. We will profile that as well in due course. Okay, thanks DPA, and we move on to a story about how AI can enhance digital inclusion and fight inequality. And this is from the World Economic Forum on the 4th of June, 2025. I'm just going to make sure I'm on the right page for that. Yeah. So the blurb for this says that AI and digital inclusion will emerge as critical instruments in counteracting the forces that perpetuate inequality. By broadening access to the digital realm, we can unlock pathways to increase productivity, foster innovation, and generate new employment opportunities for a wider population. The article goes on to say, for many of us, digital technologies are deeply entrenched in nearly all aspects of our lives, whether it's communication, work, shopping, learning, or entertainment. But soberingly, nearly 2.6 billion people, one third of the global population, still lack internet access, leaving them without connectivity and unable to benefit from all of AI's advantages. So it covers two kind of bites of our usual cherry. It says digital technology must be a bridge, not a barrier, ensuring every voice is amplified and all communities empowered. AI holds the potential to solve many pressing problems for humanity, whether that be drug discovery in medicine, fraud detection in financial systems, crop monitoring in agriculture, or self-driving vehicles. But such innovation cannot hide the deep ethical issues, societal risks, and worsening inequalities associated with the technology. So this is definitely singing my song. Should effectively harness the synergistic
Good
potential of
one.
digital
Good word.
inclusion and AI, we must focus on building an accessible digital economy. Digital inclusion leads to increased productivity and innovation, as well as new job opportunities in the tech sector. And there's several other paragraphs we can include in a link to on the notes to the show. But it kind of basically says a digital inclusive economy is a growth catalyst. 10% increase in broadband penetration can boost GDP growth rates by 1.4% in developing economies. So good news, but some health warnings as well, as we have talked about ourselves today. AI can be a powerful tool, but it needs to be applied in a kind of with discrimination.
Yeah, and this is it's an article looking at the world as a whole, as it were. But really, you can see how the pieces in the UK, at least, are beginning to come together in the terms that this sort of article is talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think almost any of what was just said there could have been said by one of us when we were speaking to Elizabeth. So it's good to see, even at the kind of international level, that there's this kind of basic understanding of what the issue is and how to move forward on it.
Yeah. Okie doke. And our last article for today is from by Darren Gillen, the Digital Inclusion Development Officer at Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. And the title, this is from a LinkedIn post, Artificial Intelligence Opens New Doors. And it refers to a longer article in the SC TFN.Scot magazine, May 2025. And he talks about when we talk about digital inclusion, it's easy to focus on infrastructure and devices, but what happens when we truly listen to communities and let their needs shape the tech? And this is harking back to our founder, John Popham. He would have always said that listening to communities and not for the people, not to be the driver, not the technology. So the article talks about a powerful example coming from the West of Scotland Regional Equality Council and SCVO digital inclusion teams supporting elderly minority women to further develop their language skills. The breakthrough was AI, specifically OpenAI ChatGPT, accessed via mobile phones, tools already familiar to the group. Using culturally relevant content like Pakistani truck art and enabling interaction in Urdu through voice and text, participants used AI to build English skills, translate forms, and even help grandchildren better with homework. More than learners, they became co-creators, helping AI better recognize regional Urdu dialects. And the article kind of concludes this is what inclusive, ethical, and community-led innovation looks like. It's not just about technology, it's about dignity, language, and belonging. And so the full article is in the latest issue of Third Force News, which is published online. So great to see that practical application there, Sweyn.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
language is an area where AI really should work because basically AI is all about the manipulation of and finding patterns within language. And of course, there's been an AI available to all of us for many years. It's called Google Translate.
Yeah.
That is an AI. It works out what the next word should be based on context and
Yeah.
inputs. So yeah, that's a great example, and I think in terms of overcoming language barriers, I think AI is clearly brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So well done to SCVO and West
indeed.
Scotland Regional Equality Council for using AI in that kind of very interesting and useful way. And we wish them well and hope that other councils of voluntary organisations can also help people to develop their skills around that. I know the other SCVO, the one in Sandwell that I see more often in this part of the world, are looking at digital as well. Two of their colleagues actually were at this event on Friday, the West Midlands Funders Network event. So I know they're very, very up on it, and yeah, we hope to hear more stories really of what's happening. Again, harking back to our founder, John always was all about the stories, wasn't he, Sweyn? You know, he wanted to
Absolutely.
hear people talk about what they were, what was useful to them, and that should shape technology. Okay, so we're coming to an early end to our show today. So we're giving you back 10 minutes of your valuable time. Thank you, people who've listened to and joined us this week, or who are hearing the show later on. Thanks very much to our special guest, Elizabeth Anderson from the Digital Poverty Alliance, who's kind enough to join us for the first part of the show. We will keep a close eye on what's happening there and with the other digital inclusion organisations around the country who are making a difference, and encouraging people to go online and use communications. But there's no substitute for the face-to-face. So do also see people in real life and stay in touch with people. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.